Okay, everybody, I'm going to walk you through the basics of the Photoshop user interface. I'm just kind of doing this kind of seat of the pants here, and I'll just try and get through the basics of how to find things, where you can adjust things, and save your new layout. Okay, so I have the default layout. Pretty sure it's default. I try to get it back to default as much as possible. So up here you have your color palette, have your swatches. I generally keep these open. Any sort of gradients you might have, I've collected a lot over the years, and any sort of patterns. And every time I install a new version of Photoshop, it gives me like a copy of my palette. So sometimes I gotta go in and clean this out, but you can see I haven't done that in a while. Okay, then underneath that you have the properties, which is kind of handy, but generally only if you're working with shapes. Sometimes I use it, but again, only if I'm working with shapes that might have like round corners and other live shape features. Adjustments, I don't really use this very much. This is pretty much like the same sort of adjustments you might find over here when you have an image in this sub menu of the image menu. I mean, you just add them as layers and they'll, work on everything underneath them. Libraries, I used to use this a bit more when I worked with teams and I wanted to share stuff with them, but I've taken most of this stuff down because of Adobe's penchant for using AI, training their AI on stuff that's on Adobe Cloud. And underneath this is the layers, channels. Right, if we have an image in here, you'll see the 4 channels, or whatever color channels we have, depending on the color space within the image that you're working on. And the pass palette, right? This is just the general default grouping. We talked about this in class. Let's go back to layers, and I don't have anything open yet. So over here we have the tool palette, and I should mention that these double arrows here basically means that it will collapse or expand any palette, like for instance over here too, right? So that will open up everything underneath it. And you see this little handle under here, I think, let's see right there, that little one there. I'm gonna move over to the history. There we go. So that means that you can grab that palette. That's like the little handle grabber. You can just grab it and move them around where you want to. We'll just leave that there. History is a good one to keep open, just because it gives you a visual reference of all the things that you've done to your image, right? Now across the top here, this home button, this will take you back to your open page here, which is, sometimes I think it defaults to that. You can set it to default to this, but it's up to you. That's all your recent files and whatnot. And to the right of that is the tool features for your selected tool down in your toolbar here. So we have the move tool turned on, right? Shortcut V, and you can have different tool presets. You can tell it to automatically select group or layer by clicking on a visible pixel. And you can tell it to select a layer or a group. And this is the transform handles or controls. And if you have multiple items selected, you can sort them by lining them up on the left, centering them on the right, lining up to the right side, or distributing them vertically, evenly, and align them to the top edges, align them vertical, centers, bottom edges, and distribute horizontally. And any other, like the align is under here, but you can change your alignment to either the selection that you have or to the canvas overall. Okay, and under here, you show layer bounds on hover. That can be handy. Sometimes it can be a little annoying. Just depends on how you like it. Let's see, expand layer group on click. That means if you have a group within your layer stack You just click it and it will open up right away. Show hover bounds from layers. So if you hover over a layer, this will create a blue box around the artwork on that layer. If you get very complicated image going, this is handy to find your way around. Okay. So we have our marquee tool, which is all of our selection ways of selecting things. Right. If you see like a little arrow here, right, that means there are sub tools. Right. Just like in Clip Studio, if you know Clip Studio, a tool will have some sub tools, and that's where they're located, like here. I usually have Magic Wand because I use that predominantly. It's the most useful feature for the way I work with stuff. This is the crop tool, so you can. I just basically use a crop tool. I don't use a perspective crop tool very much. What else we got here? Just hover for a little bit, it'll tell you what it is. So frame tool, I think it's a new one. I don't really use that. The eyedropper tool, right? So if you want to select a color, you can also lay down a color sampler and it will pick from that sample. A ruler tool is also very handy for straightening crooked images. The note tool, don't use it that much, and the count tool, again, don't use it that much. And if I click on this, this is spot healing. This is for fixing up any sort of dirt or other blemishes if you have a scan or messy artwork. This will patch that. And the brush tool, the pencil tool is underneath that, the color replacement tool, and the mixer brush tool. If you get into painting, you might use the mixer brush. That's Photoshop's naturalistic painting tool, like it'll mix the pixels underneath the color or underneath your brush. Color replacement tool, I don't use it very much, but it's probably a lot like doing a transparency log and painting a new color over top of pixels. I don't know. I don't use it. The clone stamp and pattern stamp tool. History brush tool, again, I don't use that much. The eraser tool, I use that all the time. Background eraser tool, not so much. Magic eraser tool. Yeah, you give them a shot, play around with it. Some of the fun of Photoshop is just finding out what things do. And we have it defaults, I think, to you'll see it look like that. That's the gradient tool by default. But the paint bucket tool I use more than anything. So I don't know if I can change that permanently, but it's helpful. Under here we have the blur tool, sharpen tool, smudge tool. This is a new tool, I think. This is a adjustment brush tool. So I haven't played with that yet, but basically it takes an adjustment layer and applies it to the brush that you have, and then you can paint on top of that, whatever you have selected up here, brightness, contrast. Haven't used it, it's a newish tool, so play around. The dodge tool, burn tool, sponge tool. Again, these are tools from ages ago. I don't use it that much. One darkens, one lightens. It's from photographic darkroom techniques to adjust spot contrast and whatnot. And a pen tool, we use a pen tool in our class a lot, so I'm glad that's on top. The text tool, right, if I want to do horizontal text, vertical text, or vertical type mask tool. Don't use them. And our path selection tool and our direct selection tool, we use these a lot. And our shape tools, right? You can see up here we talked about this, or I briefly went over it, but you can create a shape. You can create it as a path or as pixels, right? If you go pixels, then whatever color you have in your foreground color, that is what you'll get, like a circle of that color. I usually like to use path. Shape I use sometimes too. And this is the wand tool, or hand tool, sorry. So that's the space bar, or H, which allows you just to pan around the canvas. Rotate view tool, that's just turning your canvas when you need to. And the zoom tool. Now this 3 dot here, this allows you to edit the toolbar. I've done that. You can play with this, give it a shot. That way you can surface tools, you can customize it, where you keep the tools in the toolbar that you use frequently and hide the ones that you don't use at all. I did that once a bunch of years ago, and I've been very happy since. So you can click that, and then you can say, I'm going to take this, right, and show all the stuff, to save little shortcuts for hidden toolbar extras. You can play with that. I think, is it just, yeah, the things you don't want in your toolbar, you move over. I think that's the way it goes, right? I'm going to cancel that. So here, this little box, we have our default foreground and background color. So the keyboard shortcut for that is D. So if you have a bunch of different colors, but you need to snap back to black and white, hit D, and that will change your foreground background color. This is to swap those colors, right? The keyboard shortcut is X. That can be handy, especially if you're working with masks. And if you click on any one of these, you can bring up your color picker. I think click on the back there. Yeah, you got the black. Right, and these are masking tools. So edit in quick mask mode. I don't really do that often. Change screen mode. This won't work. Well, it says it will, but you can use F to cycle through your user interface, and it's just the way that it anchors palettes to the window. And it's just because it's a legacy tool. There's been very different options for Photoshop over the years, past decades, and this is kind of a legacy thing that keeps older folks happy by having their user interface be the same thing that they've had for like 20, 25 years. And this one, so you can hover, generate image, create an open document uses features. So this is the new one. I think that's probably the AI thing. Okay, so that's the basic run through of where things are. Now this palette, probably you can see it's very empty. Now what I do sometimes, like I don't use properties very often, so I can take this and drag it, and it can anchor it as an icon. I click it, and it becomes what you call a fly out menu. You can adjust the size of it, and I think, yeah, you can do all kinds of stuff. And then click collapse it again. So this is a good place to stack things if you need more screen real estate. Adjustments, again, I don't use adjustments that much, but if you need to close these, what you can do is just click this little icon, and you have options for that palette. And usually I just go close, like that, and now the other palettes underneath it snap closed, and you can adjust the space between them if you like. All right. All right, so if you need to use different tools, different palettes, and things have gotten hidden somehow, everything is underneath the window menu, right? So you can actions, which are handy, adjustments, which I just closed, brush settings, I'm going to turn on that. So you can see the brush menu opens up here. These are the brush settings. Brushes, that's the other two underneath there. So this is all the brushes that you've used right here. You can search for the name of the brushes, size, whatnot, and show you which is selected. Now, this is similar or the same place where you can like right click. Yeah, it's not showing up because I don't have an image open, but any sort of fine tuning of your brush that you're using, you can do under the brush settings. And brushes here, if you right click on a layer that is ready for pixel art, then this will show up underneath your stylus. Okay. Let's see. So there's our channels, character styles. Now these are for text. I usually have these up. Sometimes I do graphic design and need the text stuff. Glyphs, any sort of weird text shapes. Content credentials, that is copyright information that you can embed in your file as metadata. Gradients, a histogram. Now, let's not get into that yet. I think you might get into painting, but that has to do with the color, I think, and various other values within your image. History, of course, that's this one right there. Layer comps and info. If I turn on info, it looks like this, right? And it just tells you where your pointer is and the color and stuff. I don't use it, so I close it. And Libraries, we close that. Materials, it's like, I don't know, patterns, textures, stuff like that. Measurement log, don't use it. Navigator, usually that's a little window, pan and scan across things. I don't use it that much. Notes, paragraph and paragraph styles. I have these open in my user interface because I use text a lot. Paths, of course, that's this path right here. Patterns, up here, patterns. Properties, that's this little tab right there. Shapes, and this is the different shapes. I turn this on, let's see. Yeah, okay, so this is, again, like patterns, right? These are shapes that I've had loaded in here, copies and stuff like that. So this is just a very flat shape of stuff, and I don't really use it that much, to be honest. Close. If I need a symbol, I can usually find a symbol online, download it, and then use it if I need to. Let's see, styles. Styles are ways you can style your pixels, right? So I have some stuff from Blue's Clues here left over. Let's see what we got here for felt effects or clay textures. So you can just draw straight flat artwork and apply these styles and make up custom styles, save them as styles, and apply it to the artwork. Okay, so there's natural one here. Let's open up. There we go. So different things you can apply to just flat artwork at a click. So the way Blue's Clues worked, some artwork had like a black clay around it, which they used to do by hand. They would put it around like an image or something, and instead I would just draw a shape and then plop a texture on it, and it looked identical to the old stuff. So I'm gonna close that. Alright, so swatches, that's our color swatches here. Timeline, this is if we're working with animation in Photoshop, because you can animate in Photoshop, it's just a pain in the butt. Tool presets, let's see, pull this up. So any selected tool you have may or may not have presets. That's used to be one of the options that Photoshop had before. I think they kind of sunsetted the tool presets and turned them all into brush actions. But the tool presets still work for other tools. You can preset and create your own presets for all kinds of stuff. So whatever you're doing, you can, if you do it repeatedly, make a tool preset, just use that and click, 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 and Bob's your uncle. All right, and version history, well, I don't really need that much. I don't even think I've ever used it, but version history, cloud documents will show here. Yeah, I don't use that again, so I'll just close that. Okay, so let's get into preferences. So in Windows, preferences are at the bottom of the edit menu down here. Keyboard shortcuts is also in Windows right here. Okay, menus, toolbar, that kind of stuff. But on a Mac, it's over here in settings, and generally you see the general setting, and for Macs it's Command K, I think it's Control K on PCs. When you see demos for me, because I work on a Mac, this little symbol represents Control on a PC, okay? So if you see that, just think Control, right? Even though on the Mac, it's Command. Now it may show up in a keyboard like this. See, if I press it, it's going to show up Command, think Control if you're on PC. Okay. When I press Control, it's going to look like this, but that's Option. No, that would be your Windows key, I think. Option, Alt, Option. This is what it looks like on a Mac, but it says Option on my keyboard, but it will say Alt on a PC keyboard. All right, let's get back to settings. So if I click in General, you'll notice that, well, there's a big selection here in the settings that is this list here, okay? So just general settings, you can set your color picker. Apple has one, maybe Windows has one, I don't know. You can try turning these on and see how they work for you. This is, I think this is default, I'm not sure. Use legacy new document interface, skip transform and placing. I think that is turned off like that, so that when you do drag something into Photoshop, you get the chance to transform it. I just turned it off. because it snaps it to the size of the canvas that you have. Let's see, I think most of these are on by default. Anyways, moving down to the interface, all right, you can choose the color theme. Right, looks like CS6, but I like this one. It's easy on the eyes. Neutral color mode, that's new. All right. So yeah, you can change all these options. I just leave them where they are. Now the workspace, auto collapse iconic panels. I'm going to see if you just leave your mouse to hover, it'll explain it further, what that application or what that preference does. It determines whether to automatically collapse open iconic panels when clicking elsewhere in the application. That is on, because if you have, say, properties open, as soon as you click somewhere else, you want that to close. You don't want it to stay open. Auto show hidden panels. Yes, sometimes you hover and it'll just pop out. I can't think of anything that's a hidden panel at the moment to show you, but again, it's turned on. Open documents as tabs. So typically Photoshop will open each document into its own window. This is a legacy thing. Once tabs became popular, they put this on here as a selection. I prefer everything kind of unified together in one window. I don't like tabs or flyout menus flying everywhere. I would just lose track of it. So yeah, if this isn't set by default, I set this, but it's up to you. I think it's handier. You just get like a row across the top of the your document showing you all the different open documents that you have. And I usually have like 5 or 6 open at the same time. Enable floating document window docking. Yeah, so if you drag it out of a tab and then just let go of it somewhere, it'll just create a new, like an open window, right? It won't be docked with the tabs. And you can have large tabs if you have like a 4K screen where you have like a lot of pixels. Sometimes this information gets really small on a 4K screen, so large tabs is an option. I'm working on a regular HD 1920 by 1080 screen, so I don't need large tabs. I need as much screen real estate as I can get. So same sort of thing here. Enable narrow options bar. That is this one. I think if you turn it off, if I hit OK, see what happens. They get thicker. Face. Enable narrow. Yeah, something like that. So workspace. All right, so that's generally how I keep that. Now with tools, if you hover over something, those big flyout rich tooltips, that's these things when you hover over something, and that is a rich tooltip. All right, so I'm just gonna, let's see, tools. I turn that crap off, it gets in my way. The tooltips are the small little ones that pop up when your mouse is still over it. I don't think it might do it because I've got that window open. But yeah, if I just hover, that's the small tooltip, right? The original tooltips. Okay, so I enable gestures because on a Mac, I use a trackpad, and it has gestures which I use all the time to maneuver around. Let's see, this may not be turned on, I don't know. Over scroll, that allows you to just zip across the canvas, and especially if you're zoomed all the way out, and you can see your whole canvas, you can still pan around, right? If that's turned off, then as soon as all the canvas is visible, you can't scroll around, right? Flick panning, right, determines if flicking with the hand tool continues to scroll the document. Requires OpenGL drawing. So that's a OpenGL drawing is settings and preferences. Basically, on my computer, I can just flick my finger like that, and it scrolls, and then slows to a stop. Right, but that's what that is for. It's for me, it's much more natural working with that. And all these other ones I think are on by default. I like the animated zoom, zoom, click, point to center. That's handy. That way, if you point your stylus somewhere, you can click and zoom, and it will zoom to that spot. I don't like zoom resizing windows. Hands down, it just makes it ugly. Zoom a scroll wheel. If I had a mouse with a scroll wheel, that would probably be handy too. Okay, so history and content creation, credentials. So yeah, you can set up your credentials here, learn about that. I'm just going to skip over that. File handling. All right, so this is where you save your automatic recovery file. I set it to every 5 minutes. I think it defaults to 10 minutes, but 5, I do enough in 5 minutes that I don't want to have to do all of that again. My default file location is on my computer, not Creative Cloud. Always save image previews. I don't know what the setting is on Windows, but I always use previews just so I know what the hell I'm looking at. And thumbnail, save in background, make sure that's turned on, and save as to original folder. Do not append copy to file name when saving a copy. I do that because I really hate the copy dropped on stuff, because I usually rename it anyways. And these, I generally don't muck about with this stuff too much. Maximize PSD and PSB file compatibility, always. I'll make sure that's always on. I used to disable compression for this, but I turned it off, right? These days, it just takes extra time to save the file. And export, you can set your default to PNG, JPEG, or GIF. JPEG, I set maximum quality. It's when you go to File, Export, this is where you set that default. Ask where to set. Export each time. I like that because you never know. Quick export metadata. You can attach this to your exports if you're doing, like, you've got a JPEG and you want to get it out really fast, right? You do a quick export, and this will hang your copyright and contact info as metadata in your JPEG. Performance. Okay, so I was talking about OpenCL. That is the open something language. So it has to do with your graphics processor. So hovering over this, the advanced settings, this is use OpenCL. That's where that flick panning comes in handy. Anti-alias guides and paths. I don't like the way that looks. I prefer the default way. GPU compositing. I'll let it just offloads that stuff to your graphics processor unit, which is handy. So I don't know how many history states you can have. You can have a lot, but 100 seems pretty good. There's times where 50 is not enough. I've screwed up enough that I have to go back, way back in time. So having 100 history states has saved my bacon a lot. And that will show up in your history tab here. All those states, they show up here. Okay. You play around with this. This depends on how your computer's settings are done, or like the specs of your computer, how much memory, how fast it is, that kind of thing. I think by default it figures it out for you, but I've set this to 6. Again, down here gives you a description. Hover over that. All right. I had to worry about this a lot when I was working on NatureCat. I don't worry about it at all working on my own stuff. And this lets you adjust how much memory you have dedicated to Photoshop's use. Okay, and I think it defaults to about 70%. I set it to 75 just because I'm in it so much. And yeah, so you can, clicking this will adjust this stuff over here, right? Depends on what you're doing, but you know, huge pixel dimensions, I do that a lot, and I think this is what those settings are. All right, image processing, I don't use it this much, so I don't really muck about in there. Scratch disks, so this is where your undo states are saved, recovered files and whatnot. So you can choose, you know, which one you want to be used first, and then if you run out of space, it'll move to the next drive. So if you have like an external drive, this is where this is handy. So you select one, you plug it in the external drive, and then you can move it up and down, right? So like I said, your first one, so I have a external drive box that has like 8 terabytes in it. So I tell it to go there first, then the files, and then my boot drive, my main drive, right? I don't want my boot drive filling up because that would be bad. If Photoshop ever crashes, right, a lot of times there's stuff left on the drive. I hope that it's gotten better over the years, but I don't really know. I've had to go in and clean up my drive several times over the years, but yeah, I hope Photoshop cleans up after itself more. But let's see, cursors. So I've shown this in class. I usually like to have, you know, an idea of what the full size of the brush tip looks like, and that's the outside ring, right? Normal brush tip. I want to see the full size. I like to crosshair so I know where my pointer is, right? And I can show the brush leash while smoothing. I turn that on, and I usually like to go precise so I know where everything is, right? And a brush preview, this is for, I think there's a key combo, if I remember correctly, where you can click, press a key, click, drag your stylus up and down or sideways, and it'll change the size live, right? I don't remember what it is. I never use it. Let's see, transparent settings, never use it. Rulers, I default to inches. Type is points. That's the only thing I really change here. I think print, this might be a default 300. If it's not, set it to 300. Guides, grids, and slices. This is where your color is for your guides that you would drag out of the ruler that I've shown you guys, or artboard borders, and all kinds of other stuff in here. I think, let's see, so path, this is the path color, 1 pixel size. Controls, grids, so you can play around with this, see how it looks. Smart guides, so it's just come on automatically when you're moving stuff around on canvas. And yeah, so you can muck about. If cyan is hard for you to see, you can choose something else. I don't know if anybody suffers from color blindness, but this is where you can change that if it's too hard to see the difference between any of these tools and what's on the canvas. Plugins, I don't really touch it. Type, these are usually always on, and I'll just leave it. Enhance controls, show touch bar properties. I don't have the touch bar. I don't have like a MacBook, so I turn that off. Technology preview, sometimes this stuff is helpful. Enable preserve details for upscaling. Yeah, artificial intelligence assisted upscaling technologies. It's up to you. If you want to use that, you can. Content aware, that used to just look at stuff around your selection and creatively like get rid of the stuff that you've selected. I don't know if it's AI now. Let's see, make shape of paths, falling edges in an image. Yeah, so I'm not tracing edges in the path. Yeah, like I said, I don't use it that much. Precise previews for 16-bit. I don't know what that is. So product improvement, turn this off, right? Turn it off. If it's an opt-in, this is the thing with any kind of software that you start using. A lot of times they'll just opt you in, and it'll send telemetry data of what you're doing and how you're using the software back to them. And sometimes it's anonymous, sometimes it's not. Either way, I don't trust big corporations and what they're going to do with my data. So I turn this off on everything, right? Even my iPhone. And I like Apple devices, right? But I still don't trust them. All right, so that's a quick overview of preferences. Once you get everything set up in your user interface, right, you can go under Window, Workspace, right, and then set it up as a new workspace. So whatever you've set up and move things around, right, and you want to make it savable or you get back to it, say at school, right, if you're switching computers, but I think you guys are first year, you have your own computer with you. Anyways, if you want to save your keyboard shortcuts, save your menus, and save your toolbar because you've made, your own customized stuff, change the name, click Save, and you will find it in this list here, okay? All right, so you can lock a workspace, keyboard shortcuts and menus, blah, 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 all that stuff. You can delete these workspace or reset it, right? So it has some built-in stuff here. I think this is what it opens up with. Now here, I've played around with over the years, these spaces. So yeah, as far back as like 2015. My latest one that I used in class is this one. So I'm going to click that, and it changes everything over here. So I'm going to move this down. All right, so that will be, this little area is where the navigator shows up, but I'll just leave that for my lovely little picture here. Okay, so like I said, I've moved paths outside of the layers, and I've hidden everything else. The tools, I've customized, and if I click and hold this, the edit toolbar, all that stuff I don't generally use, I just stick in here, right? If I need it, it's there, right? Like the tool, the type tool is the first tool I usually use the most, so that's at the top. So as you saw, when I click this, it shows the top tool right away. If I click and hold, it brings up this menu. So, and I can edit everything right there, okay? What's this? This is a new one here. Selection brush tool. Oh yeah, selection brush tool. That's a pain in the butt. Adjustment brush tool. That's another new stuff. So these have been added, and if I want, I could throw them into here because I might never use them, right? Okay, and as you work through stuff, like I said, I use the circle an awful lot, the rectangle an awful lot, so I separated it out, and with the line, I separated the line out because everything was grouped underneath the rectangle tool. This is still set up the way it is by default. Pen tool by default. Yep, so I could adjust my paint bucket on top because I only use the gradient tool every so often. The eraser tool, just a basic eraser. The brush tool, pretty much default. And magic wand, I put that at the top because that's just the way I use it. Lasso tool, polygonal lasso tool underneath. Yeah, this is pretty much all default. And artboard tool. I never use artboards very much except on rare occasions, so that's there. So I can double that up. This one I can open it up and you can see all those things in here. My history, my actions. But if it's collapsed, I can click and see everything in here. There's my actions. I have a lot of actions that I use to speed up monotonous process. And I can show you guys how to make your own, and I'll supply some to you before the upcoming assignment. And it'll make creating layers and groups and stuff a lot faster. Okay. Again, there's properties. So you can see if I click one of these, this little group of 3 icons, that includes those. Okay. If I moved all this stuff into here, this little line would move down. But collapse that, I can grab this and move it wherever I want, right? And this is a plugin, Magic Square. I don't use that much anymore because Photoshop's brush palette has really improved over the years. Brush settings. So this is that settings menu I talked about. And again, text, character, glyphs, all that kind of stuff. Okay, and yeah, I think this is, my perspective tools. This is a tool I bought to help me build perspective grids really quickly. It's like, I don't know if it's like, let's say like $25, $30 Canadian now. I'm not sure. It used to be like 16, but it's helpful for making a really fast perspective grid. All right, let's see what we got here. Layer comps. Layer comps are handy if you have a lot of various elements that need to be revealed. Like if in a layout you have a couple of scenes that are being reused, a layer comp basically remembers all the visible layers, right? So you can turn off all the layers that don't relate to that particular layout, create a layer comp, and you click that for that scene, and all the stuff relative to that scene, all the layers, turns on, and you can have a whole bunch of comps, which basically just turn things off and turn things back on to make it easy to see. Let's get to starting up a new file. All right, so you're working on your assignment. You're going to go to New, and you're going to get something like this. All right, now I'm in Recent, and I've used this a lot, so you may not have anything in Recent. Okay, but what you can do is go to Print. Right, you want to start with a letter. You want landscape orientation. Let me just hover there for a second. going to say landscape. Let's just click it, see what happens there. So you can see it changes everything. Make sure artboards is turned off. It will automatically default to artboards. That may be problematic for you. Just say the resolution is 300 pixels per inch, as we put in our preferences, right? Background contents, white, you can change that to white, black background color, transparent, or custom color. White is fine. And advanced options, you want it square pixels, right? We don't want to change especially anamorphic pixels, right? This square pixel is default for everything, okay? So we can hide that. RGB, we don't really worry about that much. So we can hide all that. 8-bit is fine. 16-bit, 32-bit, just madness, right? Okay, so once you get everything set up, you can even name it here, right? And what's that say? I don't use this that much. Save document preset. All right. So yeah, so now you can name your document to whatever you're working on and then hit create. And now we have everything, right? Now for rulers, again, if rulers aren't visible, go under view. You can turn them on or just hit Control R, right? So I can go Command R, Control R for you guys if you're on PC. You can see it automatically comes up to inches because I've set that up in my preferences. Now if I click and hold and drag out of that, it's going to bring me a guide, and this one like that. All right. You see our background. All right. So if I select this, maybe if I change, if I do that. No. Okay. So the reason all this stuff is ghosted is because the background is called background, right? And it defaults with a lock pixels, right? So that means if you grab a color, whatever, and draw on it, it'll draw on it, right? If there were this transparent pixel lock here, let me hold that up, indicates layer is partially locked. That means if there's pixels with color data in them, you will paint them. If there are pixels with no color data in them, they are transparent pixels and you will not paint them, right? It won't add any more paint. So I can undo that. So basically moving on from this, because if you want to put something behind it, you can click it or double click, yeah, and you'll get layer 0. You can set a color for that layer, right? You can set a default mode for that layer. Normal is fine. 100% opacity. Layer 0, click OK. All right, and now this is like a regular layer, right? If it was a background, you wouldn't be able to move it in the line, like in the stack. Okay, so you can lock that layer. You can put like BG, something like that. So you're going to start drawing your, say, your first assignment, or you're going to start doing things in perspective. So that's where you create a new layer, right? Check your brush, you're going to right click. All right, happy HB, like so. Okay, so I'm going to draw my horizon line, and I'm going to hold shift and draw. All right, remember I said holding shift locks the brush to horizontal or a vertical vector, right? So like that. Like it won't change the vector even if you let go, right? It snaps back. You have to let go and then drag down. So the first direction you go into is the one that locks to. It doesn't lock diagonally, unfortunately. That might help stuff. So let's get that back there. All right, so this horizon line, I'm gonna be nice and neat. Horizon line. Return, and I'm going to lock it because I don't want to muck it up with any further stuff or drawings. Okay, so I'm going to create a new layer, and you can see this one is locked. I can't even change my opacity, but if I click that lock, I can open it up. Let's knock back that opacity a little bit and lock it up again. All right, so the opacity you can jump to by using the keypad. I think on PCs you have to make sure num lock is turned on, but if I hit 1, let me just get back to 0. That should be 1. Oh yeah, I have to be in the tool here. There we go. So if I hit 2, it jumps to 20%, 30, 1 for 10%, 90% opacity, or if I hit 0, it goes to 100% opacity. Okay? I can lock that. So, or I can just use the slider here. And we'll lock that. So you can see that's transparent. Alright, so if I'm in the brush tool, I'm going to hit B. That's the same across all operating systems. Alright, so it's B. You can see the opacity is set to 20%. That's because I was hitting it in the keyboard and that was selected. So I'm going to right click and hit this again because I want my opacity set to 100%. There we go. Okay. Alright, I'm just going to delete that one. Got my horizon line layer, so maybe we'll just call this rough. Alright. Okay, so like I said, you're gonna start with your first box. Alright, try to angle it in a way that looks solid, like everything is radiating to the same vanishing point. For some of this, I'm going to hold Shift because I don't have a third point. I just want that stuff straight. So, all right. So usually when I'm looking at this and I'm doing things rough, like I'm looking how this line might relate to the space between these two lines, right? At this point, if I'm just being really rough, it doesn't matter if I'm correct or not. Okay, so if you're going to do your box drawing assignment, something like this, right? You want to sketch out where you put all your boxes. You can do that, right? I think it's probably something like that. So yeah, you can just go around the board, put all your stuff. If you want to do like a vertical 1-point stuff is usually directly in the middle, right? So you could, I'm going to turn that horizon line on and just do a best guess. So we got 8.5 by 11, so that's 5.5 inches. Right about there, I'm holding Shift. There, that's my vertical axis. Lock that again. So if I'm going to draw something in 1 point, it's going to be that's the vanishing point. All right. So let's say you go on a stack of boxes. Try to do them same width apart, something like that. All right. And all of these corners might radiate like that. All right. Draw through your artwork. Now, as I said before, you could use a kind of brush where you just click and draw a solid line like that, holding Shift. But at the moment, I prefer you guys to try doing it freehand. You have to build up your muscle memory, right? And so I'm going to do that. So even if you do it horizontal like that, sometimes it's a little tricky. I might do just to help out. There we go. Something like that. All right, and you have a whole bunch of boxes in 1 point perspective. So you just keep doing that. Like so. Maybe these go back behind here or shorter. I don't know. That's up to you. Okay, so let's move on to establishing our vanishing points for this central box. Think of this as like the key box, right? And I think this feels like a good 90-degree angle, right? Like this feels like a 90-degree angle, right? If your vanishing points are too close together, it might look like this, right? That doesn't look like a, let me see here. If I can do this right. So if your vanishing points are too close, these lines might look like really pointed like that. Okay. Especially if your box is receding like that. Yeah, your vanishing points are too close if it looks like that. Okay. Now if your vanishing points are too far apart, let's back it up here, then your box will start to look like this. We'll see too much of this side, right? Something like that. It doesn't quite look what I'm talking about because I haven't exaggerated as much, but you'll know it when you see it. Mostly because I think if I turn this off, turn that off, so they're too far apart. There's not enough angle here, right? You're going to see too much of this face, maybe too much of that. It's going to feel strange, okay? So, and if your points are too close, you're going to get this kind of weird distortion. Like if this goes right to here, this comes right to there, and your side is like this. Right. Too close. Right. Too pointy. Get rid of that one. Okay, this is a rough. What we got here? Right. Okay, so now we're going to find our vanishing points. Okay, and using this as our deselect that as our model. Okay, so we go to the pen tool, which is P for pen. If I want to hit P, right, and we have our horizon line. So let's see how I did here. Right, I'm going to click on the horizon line, something like that. But first, I'm going to bring down a guide. I'm going to use A. If it's not snapping, then I need to go to Snap and get it snapping to that horizon line. There we go. Okay. So maybe I can find a good middle point. Maybe right there. And I drag one out here like that. Kind of get as approximate as I can. If I need to adjust it again, I'm going to hold Command Control on your PC and just drag it again. There we go. So I can just wiggle this, it'll snap to that intersection. Okay. So there's my vanishing point. I'm going to delete that. Brush. Alright. So I can hold Shift and just clicking down, but because I have pressure sensitivity on this brush, you get something like this, right? Depending on how hard you click or press when you do click. It starts from the last one, and it's a little tricky. If you use the regular brushes that don't have any pressure sensitivity, it'll just draw a line, okay? Now, if I want to say rough 2, this is our fixed perspective layer. I'm going to knock that back a bit. Go back to rough 2. So this is going to be, oh yeah, see I have both ends selected, so it's moving it around. I don't want to do that. So I'm going to hold this down, click, right, so it just selects that one, like so. Okay, and brushes this thick, so I hit return while I'm in the brush tool, right? or enter on the PC, and it will stroke that line with your brush. So I'm going to grab this and drag this up. I'm holding shift so it locks it, that vertical, like that. There we are. And I can draw it down. I'm holding shift to create a perfect vertical. Okay. So there's that. So now I'm going to change this name to Vanishing Points. Okay. Because anytime I make a new shape or new path, Photoshop will make it a work path. And if you had stuff in there before, it will delete things that you've had in there before. So changing it will keep things working fine. All right, so now I'm going to go back to the pen tool again. But this, you see these ends are selected. I'm in the pen tool. If I hold the command or control, click, it'll deselect that. So now I can go to this corner, click, go to the horizon line and click there, and then click here again. Okay. So same things I did before. Now go back to A and find something that feels right, but you know, I can be a little bit more accurate with this. I want to be, say, something like that. I'm going to do this and hold shift, drag it out, because I want that bottom, like where that bottom's going, so something like that. Okay. So now I can select that one and I can delete it. Back to brush, hold command control, click it just so it selects that one. Oop, gets the wrong one, and I can do this like so. And there, like that. Okay. So now I've got all those quadrants that I need, right? Okay. So as I mentioned before, let me erase this. All right, a handy little tool I actually learned about today because I was looking at the keyboard shortcuts. I'll post a link for Adobe's website that has a list of keyboard shortcuts. You don't have to know them all, but there is a list of popular ones, right? And another one for transform selections. Has a lot of brush stuff in there. So if you hold down, I think it's the tilde, or that little tick there, that's called, what's that called? It's called a grave accent. So if let's say you're drawing with this brush, hold a grave accent, and it uses it as an eraser. So you can see here, normal drawing mode, press this, it goes to clear. That means you can use your brush as an eraser. So we need to find, let's say if we want to make a square, right, a square box or square rectangle, we need to do that. Okay, so on that layer, so I'm going to use my lasso. I'm going to grab the artwork here. I did this in class, I think, with the pen tool, and that's totally fine. Whether it's a pen tool or artwork, it's up to you, and we'll just stay consistent. You can see I was a little off there, but so pen tool. Click the vanishing points. So I'm going to click here and then hold shift so that no matter where I click up here, it's going to drop it directly over top of that anchor point. So I'm just going to select those. And there we go. Let's knock that down, nudge it a little bit. Okay, so I think that's okay. So I'm going to transform that. Move that down, we'll snap to the center. Right, and then I can rotate it, hold shift. There we go. Hit return to commit to that. B for brush. Hit return. So that is a square measurement. I can do the same for the other side. I'm going to hold shift. Slide this over. Just get as proximate as I can. There we go. Okay, so with this edge and this edge exactly the same, Now we know that is going to be a proper square. Okay. All right. So now on to measuring points. So I'm going to take this, I'm going to click A. So I've got that anchor point back here, my horizon line or my vanishing point. So I'm going to zoom in, get like right close to that leading corner, right? Zoom out. Okay. So now I've got that one selected. I'm going to hold shift to select that, and then I'm just going to copy. All right. So now I don't have to make another one. I tend to keep all my rulers on 1 or 2 layers, but if it's easier for you, make a new path layer, right? And then you can paste that path. So you can call this like measuring point. Right? Okay. So let's hold Command, click this so that the whole path is selected, and I want to transform it. So Command T, let's move our center. Right. By default, I think this is turned off. If you don't see your rotation point, it's this little icon. Just click it to turn it on. Move that to the corner. And I'm going to rotate it to match the horizon. That. And that is the measuring point. Okay. So I'm going to Command. I'm going to click and drag because otherwise it will lock. What you can do is you can view guides. You can lock your guides. So even if you hover over them, it won't select them, right? That could be handy. Okay, so there is the measuring point. It's going to cross that line, right? So if we project back to that measuring point, where it intersects with that line, which is our projection, right? Our perspective projection, right? Using that measuring point, if we're consistent, right? This is where a square surface will be, like, be something like that. Okay. So if we're consistent, we measure everything from this point. Everything will look relative and fine and perfect. You don't have to worry about things looking weird. If you start moving this measuring point around and trying to add things to the surface, it's going to look strange. Things aren't going to quite line up. Okay. So we can do the same thing on the other side. I'm going to grab this guy here, bring him right down. Just kind of have a look, making sure I'm right there. Zoom out. And select that tool, shift. So I can select both of them, and I'm going to copy it. Go back to my measuring point layer and paste it and transform. Move that up there. Move that right to up there. Zoom in here. Sure I got that nailed. There we go. Return. All right. So now I just have this, and it should work. All right. There we go. So that is a perfect square cube. All right. So I'm going to use my Graves accent here and get rid of some of these lines here. Well, you can hold down E and just use your eraser if you want. That's fine too. But if you hit E, go to eraser, you can use your square bracket to resize, make things a little bit speedier. You can also turn on pressure sensitivity. That's what this means here, right? Pressure for opacity. And this is the flow, enables airbrush style buildup of effects. That's optional, but you see I'm not pressing very hard, and it's I'm pressing a little bit harder now. So looks and feels a little bit more natural, right? Okay. So we have measuring points, vanishing points. So I'm gonna hover over this. I can move this to here. And then I can grab this one. I got the right one. Nope. Okay, just move that out of the way. Grab this. Put that there. Right, so we can project the back side of our box if we want. Brush. Select this one, that, and do the same thing for our back corners here. There are going to be some inaccuracies. Always weird how it does that. Right on the corner. Right. So it does happen because pixels are not perfect. Okay? No matter what anybody says, pixel perfect is different than real perfect. Because pixels are not atoms, right? So if you want, you could just deselect that. It looks like a good intersection. I don't really want it to be there. I'm gonna just put it right here. So far. There. Something like that. Okay? So what I mean by pixel perfect versus atomic perfect is that pixels are larger than atoms, right? Even though we have 300 dots per inch, we're still not super accurate. The lines, you know, they go wherever they want. You can lock the points to the pixel grid, but again, that creates even more inaccuracies. So let's say just do that. Yeah. So I'm gonna cheat it. Try and cheat a little bit here. All right. Like that. Okay. Funny how that works sometimes. Or we get the two edges almost exactly lined up. Okay. Well, because my vantage points are, where are they? Vantage points. Right. So I didn't collect this. So let's see. Yeah, my vantage points are so close together, or almost the same distance between the canvas areas. They were turned a bit more, then you know that back corner wouldn't align so much. But because they're almost identically spaced apart. So that's how I would say you could approach your rough work for your boxes, and yeah, just doing your rough lines and your correct perspective, right? So let's see, you got that. So I'm going to grab these 3 layers, right? I hold shift to select all those ones, click group, we'll just call that rough. And I can knock back the opacity, like that. And now I can create a new group, and create a layer inside that group, another one inside that group. So let's call this fill. Let's call this line. Let's call this box 1. Okay, so a line, that's where we're going to do our clean line. grab my graphite, Blackwing Black, select the line layer, so you can see it's not a perfect black. I don't know if you can see, but it's pretty dark. But I scanned in my Blackwing pencil, graphite, and my animation pencil. I think this is like Color Race Blue. Yeah, Color Race Blue, Color Race Red, or Carmine Red, and a Blackwing graphite. So it just kind of matches the pencil stuff I use all the time. Okay, so we're going to clean this up. Now, I had said I want you to try doing freehand, okay? I still want you to do that. So I'm just going to, let's see, I'm at 10. Yeah, I'm just going to make it a little bit thinner, just because it's very bold. 6, there we go. All right. So if I hit tab, I can hide my user interface and get as much screen real estate as possible. Right? And I can rotate. Now I try to rotate this so that it's easier for me to swing my arm. I'm left-handed, and the natural flow and arc of my arm is at this angle. Like if I just swing from my elbow, I'm going to make an arc like that, right? If I swing from the shoulder, I can make much larger arcs, right? Or straight lines. So I try to get this where it's a lot easier to draw. And just by freehand, I'm gonna go like that, right? And I like the freehand because it shows the artist. There's imperfection, right? You can click here and go like this, back and forth, and you get a dead perfect straight line. You might not even be able to tell the difference, but your brain does. Okay? Your brain knows the difference. And this practice helps you become a better artist, better drawer. So even if you never go into animation, this will at least give you some skills, because we didn't have any of these easy tools back in the day, right? So even if you get like a little bit of a bow, you can try it again. You get a little out of whack, just erase that bit. Like that. Okay. Now, if you're in this and you can see it's not, right, all the tool stuff is hidden. If you hit enter or return, right, it'll bring up your tool properties. Okay. Now, if you're doing some curve stuff, like you're doing some ellipses, right, I would recommend that you probably try to practice your ellipses forwards and backs. Okay, like something like this. It's better when you've had some practice, right? Or something like this, where you can just do it really fast, right? This is what I'm used to doing, right? And if I need to make like a cylinder, I'm always doing stuff like, if I can't nail it, a lot of times I try to go the opposite way, see what happens. Okay. So my roughs always look a lot like that. But if you're doing cleanup, you know, there is the option of using the smooth tool, right? And I turn that leash on and set the color so you can do like a clean line, right? Let it catch up, like so. It takes a little bit of practice getting used to it, but you know, you can make some very clean, smooth lines. So if you were to do this straight like this, oh, it's a pretty good line. It's not 100% perfect. I mean, if I wanted to do a straight line, you can see like it's almost sort of perfect. There's a bit of a curve to it, but that's fine. If the layout calls for perfection, then the art director will tell you. So you can use smoothing, but I recommend trying to do it freehand. All right. So you've seen the samples that students turned in before, pencil and paper. It's not perfect. Doesn't need to be. Just, be as perfect as you can get. We should try to at least be consistent. A little bit. Just a little bit thinner on the bottom, I think. All right. So something like that. All right. So now, as far as cleanup comes, it's not a necessary thing for this project, but it will be necessary for upcoming projects, right? Is that the outside edge of an object, any edge that you can put your hands behind, you want that to be thicker than the lines inside, right? And typically it's like a double thickness for the outside line and versus a single thickness on the inside line. I mean, that's what we use with rotating pens because we have to draw the line twice, and the line by the pen was like absolutely perfect, and we would just draw that line twice, separating it by a tiny fraction of an inch or millimeter, and then filling in that gap. So you had a double thick line, and then we drew the inside lines with a perfect single line. So we can do the same thing here. So our outside line brush is like that, 6 points, but we can knock it back to about 4 and continue. So I can press hard like that. So if it looks like there's enough difference, if not, go down one more. Like that. Okay. Brush. Use my Graves tool there. Graves accent. Tell Jim Graves he's got a tool named after him, or keyboard shortcut. Graves accent. Do our rotate. That's what I want to do. All right. Okay, see how this goes. So crazy thing. Now think about controlling your line thickness. Right. If the line is a little bit thicker, it kind of indicates that there's a shadow there. If the line gets thinner, then that could be interpreted as a highlight, right? So something like that. So if I turn off, hover at the side here, turn off my rough, there. So that's what the cleanup line of the box looks like. But when you go to hand in your rough, your work, if you don't want the sketchy stuff in there, that's fine. Let me just get back here. Let me just hit tab. Easier. Okay. So there's that. So yeah, you can turn off your rough, but leave your corrected perspective in here. But bring the opacity like right down so it doesn't interfere with the clean line. Okay. My lines might be a little bit thin here, but it's all right. If I needed to thicken these lines up here, you can just create extra versions of this. So like to copy, the keyboard shortcut to copy and create a new layer is Control J. All right, so if I create, you can see how that line's thickening up with each layer. So I think if I select them all, I don't know if this will still work, E to merge them all together. Let's see. see. Did that work? Yeah, it looked like it did. Yeah. Okay, so it picking them up. So maybe when I go do the final line, see that's 3, 6 I think is what I cleaned it up with. Yeah. So I went with 8. I could probably get on with 8. Stuff like that. Okay. Alright, so that's the approach I would take to making all of your rough boxes. Okay, and this is the same approach that I would take for our next assignment when we have to do our core volumes, but I'll put all that together in another video for everybody. So yeah, let me know if you have any questions. All right, good luck.